Once again, we are blessed and graced to have with us Miss Joy Umandap, our friend and psychologist, who will give us a talk about, once again, tenacity, resilience, and learning from failures. But before that, I think it's best to begin with a simple prayer. So I invite all of you uh, to remain calm and to be aware of your surroundings, of where we are at this point. We begin our prayer in the name of the Father, the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. Dearest Lord, we thank you for this brand new day. We thank you for this opportunity to gather together as one Joy Nostalg family, to learn about resilience, to learn to be strong, to learn to persevere despite challenges and hardships. Moreover, to learn from our mistakes in order to be better. Because as we know, the work we do in Joy Nostalg is not simply our own, but is your work of service and compassion. We ask this through Christ our Lord. Amen. Mary, our Mother, pray for us. In the name of the Father, the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. So again, good morning. And we now give the floor to Miss Joey to give us a presentation on learning from failures. Good morning, Miss Joey.
Good morning. So I'll start now. I hope you can see the screen. So good morning, Sir Jack, Jello, everyone. Thanks again for having us over, Bolataw. So now we'll talk about learning from failures and experiencing loss and disappointment. Well, I guess this is something that it's a common human experience, and I'd just like to give a brief outline so we know where we are and how to situate ourselves. The first topic will be on growth mindset, and it's an attitude towards failure and also growth and personal development, of course. And then the next is experiencing failures and disappointments from the perspective of grief and loss. Because when we fail at something, it means we fail to achieve a goal. In that sense, we lose that goal. So we have to grieve from that loss as well. And then the next would be on honoring our emotions. Given that we've lost something, that we failed at something, how do we honor our emotions? We hear this often, but how do we do that, right? And the last would be on rational positivity and the importance of experiencing positive emotions. We hear a lot about being optimistic, about being hopeful, and then we also hear the term toxic positivity, that some people just tend to look at the positives, that it gets a bit too much. Sometimes it's grating. How do we remain rational and still optimistic, right? So this is the fixed mindset versus the growth mindset. And the fixed mindset is basically just believing or seeing yourself as something that's static and that cannot be changed or improved. While a growth mindset believes that our intelligence, personality, and character can be learned, can be developed over time. In this sense, our attitude towards failures and missteps in a growth mindset is more productive, and we learn more from our mistakes as opposed to a fixed mindset where we'll look at our failures and missteps with, I guess, more self-doubt, and it keeps us from learning better. Sometimes you see students or people saying, oh, I'm not good with numbers, I'm better at English, I'm better with music. And then they just leave it at that. So they go on, move on with their lives, believing that they're only good at one thing and that they can't learn the other. When in essence, because of the concept of neuroplasticity, we can learn even as we grow older, even when we're really, really old already. We are still able to learn. Next, please. So these are some growth mindset statements. Jalo, is it okay if we move on to the next slide? There. And so before that are some growth mindset statements, and just really an attitude that you can adopt, and also notice if you're using some fixed mindset statements on yourself and changing that, revising that, so that you'll have a more constructive approach towards missteps. And then moving on, the next slide on experiencing failures and failures, they are inevitable and we experience them with one or more of these emotions. And it's helpful to just check in on what we're feeling and then noticing that, allowing ourselves to experience that. And moving on to the next slide, we see that when we deal with failures, there's a need for self-attunement because, as I mentioned earlier, we have to acknowledge the feelings of loss and disappointment. When we fail at something, we fail to achieve a goal. And in that sense, we experience a loss. And there's an essence of grief there. We have to acknowledge that we're losing something. And we have to acknowledge that because we lost something, we have emotional needs that need to be addressed. We also have to understand that, okay, the thing that we lost, is it something that we can recover or not? Because if it's something that we can recover, then we work towards recovering it. But if it's something that was lost, perhaps it was time or it was a relationship with someone that can never be the same, then we have to find a way to resolve it somehow. As Kessler said, he's the researcher who worked with Kubler-Ross on the grief process. He says your work is to feel your sadness and fear and anger because fighting it doesn't help. Your body is producing the feeling, much like blood flowing. And if we allow the feelings to happen, they'll happen in an orderly way. And this is more empowering because in this sense, we're not victims. If we keep or suppress our emotions for happening, it's sort of like letting the blood clot. We're preventing something that's natural. And because of this, it will cause our body some disarray. Moving on, for I guess with this, we understand that since we all experience failure, we also tend to realize as we get older that as we repair something, it becomes more beautiful depending on how we repair it. And we can see the spot as us, I guess. We will not reach our adult years in life unscathed. We will all experience some form of failure and mistake. We will all have made many mistakes in our life, and we repair ourselves over time. And I guess this attitude of seeing ourselves as more beautiful, as more developed as we get older is something that we can work with, or something that's more productive, as opposed to seeing that I've made a mess out of my life with all these mistakes I've made. And moving on, so how do we honor our emotions next? I guess we can just read this poem from Rumi, The Guest House. This human being is a guest house. Every morning, a new arrival. A joy, a depression, a meanness. Some momentary awareness comes as an unexpected visitor. Welcome and entertain them all, even if they're a crowd of sorrows who violently sweep your house empty of its furniture. Still treat each guest honorably. He may be clearing you out for some new delight. The dark thought, the shame, the malice, meet them at the door laughing and invite them in. Be grateful for whoever comes because each has been sent as a guide from beyond. So many of you may have many takeaways from this poem from Rumi, but I guess for me, what I wanted to highlight here is that each emotion has a purpose, has a function. So we welcome them as a guest, allow them to stay for as long as they need to stay, and then lead them out, allow them to go when they're ready to leave. So next slide. When these things happen, how do we do that? How do we welcome them in our house? There's this technique called RAIN by Tara Brach. She's a researcher on self-compassion, and she says when it gets tough, when things become overwhelming, try to remember RAIN. So it's allowing yourself to just go through that experience of being with your emotions. I wanted more time with you on this. Sometimes it takes a whole session with a client, or some people it takes them a bit quicker. You can do this for 5 minutes or even shorter, sometimes longer. But first, recognize what's happening inside. What's happening to me? Describe your internal and external experience. Like, what are your thoughts, emotions, and feelings? What's going on around you? Is it noisy? Is it crowded? Are you confused? Are you in a crowded place? Are you in a quiet place? Just notice that. And then for A, allow your experience just as it is. So having noticed that these are your thoughts, emotions, body sensations, just be present to them for a few moments without judging, controlling, or denying this experience. And then the third step is I, to investigate with interest and care. And then asking yourself, what is this experience trying to tell me? What am I longing for in this moment? How come I'm feeling this way? And just more with curiosity than judgment, just answer those questions, because that sense of curiosity will allow you the openness to really receive your answers to yourself. And having answered this, ask yourself now, in this moment, who and how do I want to be? Experiencing this emotion, knowing that you're going through this emotion, now nurture yourself with love and attention. And then also ask, what can I do to feel safe and take care of myself? In this sense, when we honor our emotions through this technique, we give ourselves the emotional support that we need to move on and try again or to proceed with life. Next step, next slide is this is an illustrator. This is one of the illustrations of Charlie Mackesy. He's a children's illustrator, and he just came out with a book which I would highly recommend. It's good for children and even adults. As the boy asked, what do we do when our hearts hurt? We wrap them in love with friendship, shared tears, and time till they wake happy and hopeful again. So we give ourselves that space to just feel the emotion, and then we can move on. Sometimes you just need time and the ability to let it out or to feel these emotions. And for the next slide, because why do we give ourselves this? Because we believe that we deserve our love and affection as much as anybody else, right? We don't deserve it more than anybody else, nor do we deserve it less. We deserve it just as anybody else. So next slide. Which brings us to self-compassion and the study on self-compassion, which has three components. One is being kind to ourselves. Number two is embracing our common humanity. And number three is cultivating mindfulness. And just being kind to yourself is a self-talk that you give to yourself. Remember the growth mindset statements, just telling yourself those things instead of criticizing yourself or putting yourself down every time you make a mistake. Number two, when we embrace our common humanity, we acknowledge our human infallibilities. We acknowledge that everyone else experiences pain, suffering, everyone else goes through hardships and makes mistakes and failures. And number three, when we cultivate mindfulness, we assess our failures with realistic judgment. So instead of over-identifying with our failures, we see it as it is. Instead of being too detached and not really seeing our own mistakes for what they are, we see it as it is. In this sense, we know how to do that. And the next slide can help illustrate this. Perhaps you can move on to the next slide after this. I think I've mentioned this quote there. The self-compassion, slide before this. This is just a quick illustration. You can read over this. A lot of people would equate self-compassion with either self-indulgence or self-pity. But using this situation, if your boss criticizes you at work and you work so hard to finish this or to accomplish this, self-indulgence would be letting yourself get away with it and not seeing your mistakes for what they are. So the statement or what you tell yourself in this instance was, he'll criticize me whatever I do. I feel bad, so perhaps I'll feel better if I take an extra long lunch break. So that would be self-indulgence. On the other hand, self-pity is ruminating in your own problems, and it promotes a sense of separateness from others. So instead of embracing our common humanity, you withdraw more, you isolate yourself more, and you wallow in self-pity. And a statement you'd hear from a self-pitying state would be, this always happens to me. Why always me? I keep trying and keep failing and failing. In comparison to these two states, or these two self-relational statements, self-compassion would be telling yourself things so that you have the emotional safety necessary to see your mistakes clearly and identify those areas that need improvement. So you would say, this is frustrating. I stayed up very late for that, and there must have been a miscommunication somewhere. Perhaps I have to explain myself better or ask him which parts need improvement. So self-compassion is a more intentional way of looking at yourself, of relating to yourself, and really figuring out what it is that needs to be changed without being too hard on yourself. And if we move to the next slide, we'll see that self-compassion is very different from self-criticism. Self-criticism is normally how we motivate ourselves. And another researcher, Neff, says that it's not necessary because in her studies, if we treat ourselves with a lot of self-criticism, the underlying question there is always, am I good enough? But self-compassion asks, what's good for me? And what's good for me tends to be really what's good for you also in the long run as well as in the short run. While self-criticism motivates us with fear, love propels us to move forward. And when we treat ourselves self-compassionately, there's a soothing hormone called oxytocin that we release that allows us that emotional safety to move on. While with cortisol, the stress hormone that is released when we treat ourselves with self-criticism is something that can move us, yes, but it is not sustainable. So self-compassion is more sustainable when it comes to motivating ourselves from failures versus self-criticism. And just notice how self-criticism functions in your life and how you can be more self-compassionate about it and what the effects are on you. So moving on to the next slide. Let's move on to rational positivity and the next slide again. So why be positive? I won't go over this, but basically when we're positive, there's a concept called broaden and build theory. When we become positive, it allows us to be more open to our experiences. And in this sense, we see which resources we can draw from. And in this sense, our sense of well-being is enhanced, which affects our health as well. So when we're positive, notice that optimistic people tend to be seen as being more good, as having more well-being, as being more generative in the sense that when they contribute something, it also engenders contributions from others, and they're also seen as more resilient. So what we want to achieve when we're positive or when we're being optimistic is not just to survive through life or to get through life, but to actually flourish and thrive. So moving on to the next slide, according to research, what do we do? The question is not how to be happy, but how do we leverage our positive experiences and emotions? We do this by doing something. I'll go over each in detail if we move on to the next slide. First, we find positive meaning. So with that, a lot of us are already well versed with this. We can reframe bad events using positive terms by counting our blessings. And if you remember the mindful gratefulness exercise from our first set of talks on embracing wholeness. And the next doing something would be, yes, please, being open or being in this moment because now is all there is. So when you experience a positive emotion, we can just be mindful of it and notice that it's something that we're grateful for and that we'd like to experience more of this. When we're open, we can accept our positive and negative experiences more openly. And when we're more open, it feeds into our positivity, which, as I mentioned, contributes to broadening or building our positive emotions. There's this concept called savoring. sometimes we tend to question those positive experiences, right? We say, oh wow, I accomplished something, this is so great, what next? Tapos we move on. Or why am I feeling this way? Why am I so happy? Something bad must happen next, right? With savoring, we just savor that emotion and just accept that positive experience for what it is. For the next doing something, it would be doing good and just practicing helpfulness and kindness, just accessing your higher self by being kind to others, by solving your problems actively instead of running away from this. Because yes, as was mentioned earlier, with a growth mindset, if we try harder at things, we can tend to increase our self-efficacy. But we do that by pursuing realistic and attainable goals. So we now notice, okay, what goals am I trying to achieve? Kaya ba talaga? Or am I overreaching? And then lastly would be being social. A lot of us are introverted and sometimes we tend to isolate ourselves more. But according to research, sometimes when we experience good news and we share this with others, we capitalize on the social gains and that our positive emotions are magnified. And sometimes interacting with others, just saying hi to your office mate or to someone, smiling at someone, is actually affecting us already. And it's engendering positive emotions within us. In the sense, it increases positive affect. So that's it, I think. If we move on to the next slide, it's also the last slide, I believe. After having tried this, after having done this, when you recover or discover something that you feel nourishes you and brings you joy, care enough about yourself by making room for it in your life. So if you notice that just sharing your good news with your office mate, or just starting the day with sharing some happy, some light conversation, if you feel that this is already a good start to your day, then perhaps you should make room for it in your life, because we need experiences of failures and loss are inevitable, but so are experiences of joy. But when it comes to research, they also found out that we need to leverage on our positive experiences more because there's a negativity bias. Our negative experiences tend to be highlighted. So if we capitalize on our positive experiences, there's something to offset that balance. And that's it. Thank you for that. I hope you were able to follow. So let's see.
Thank you, Miss Joey, for that very insightful webinar. There you are. Hi, Miss Joey. Thank you for that very insightful webinar. No? Now, I know you have another engagement after this talk, no? But before you go, some of our panelists have prepared questions for you, okay, to further deepen the discussion. No? So I may invite Miss Kimmy to begin. No? So what's the first question for you'd like to ask Miss Joey?
Good morning, Jello. Good morning, Miss Joey.
Morning.
In our company, Miss Joey, the call to excellence is something taken very seriously. Everybody is challenged to be competitive and to be accountable for our respective responsibilities. Therefore, many of our colleagues have the tendency to be quite hard on themselves when lapses take place. What advice can you give, ma'am?
Oh, I guess as was in the talk, when you notice yourself being too hard on yourself, also notice how it makes you feel when you're hard on yourself. When we criticize ourselves too much, that's how we were brought up. That's a culture. When you point something out, that's how you know you can improve on that. And that still helps, but there's also this attitude of what you can adopt when you criticize yourself. Perhaps instead of criticizing, you can point out what you did wrong with more compassion and kindness as opposed to criticism. That might be adopting a self-compassionate approach towards yourself may be more helpful for us in the long run. because yeah, we're used to being self-critical, but it also makes us feel like we're failures. So we just need to feel that, okay, we failed at that. We can do better next time. We can excel next time. It takes a bit of getting used to. This is a new idea, I think. But yeah, something
Hi,
we can.
Hi, Joey.
Thank you, ma'am.
Okay,
Can
thank you,
I
Miss
follow
Joey.
through? Yeah, can I follow through on the question? No.
Yes.
Hi again, Joey. This is Joy.
Miss
Um,
Joy.
talked about how do you become compassionate to yourself, and because a lot of people tend to be hard on themselves. You know, one of the best advices that I got from one of my mentors, he always tells me this: be gentle with yourself. Be gentle with yourself. And that's a mantra that has helped me in my life, no? But it's very difficult. So I want to ask you, how do you really become gentle with yourself?
It's difficult, but first, I guess a practical tip would be noticing your self-talk when you make a mistake. What do you tell yourself when you make a mistake? Just notice that, and then when you notice that, and you notice that there's a lot of judgment and criticism, to just say, oh, okay, I was judging myself. And then take the bite out of it. Don't criticize yourself for criticizing yourself. That's a tendency, right? I did something wrong
Mm-hmm.
again. Oh no, I'm judging myself. But if you're gentle with yourself and you notice that you're not being gentle with yourself, just saying, oh, okay, I was a bit hard on myself, and then let it go. That attitude of allowing and letting go takes some practice. It's easier said than done. But when you're gentle with yourself, your relationship with yourself is the first thing that you notice and try to nurture.
Okay. Okay, thank you. Thank you for
Miss
that,
Joey.
Joey.
But I think if I can react, no, the problem mentioned by Miss Joy are really problems of people who actually feel very responsible and who feel committed.
I
Because
agree.
quite frankly, not that it's a good thing, but uh, these are problems of good people. So this is not to be mistaken as problems of bad people, no, because there's a difference. And I think if I can just share on that particular item, I understand that sense, no, about being critical about oneself. But I think today's session was able to enlighten us by saying, well, not to be critical, but on the other hand, not to be also too indulgent, but rather
Yes.
to be compassionate. No, and compassionate means, I suppose, this additional to what Miss Joey was talking about was being honest to yourself, calling a spade, but at the same time, uh, learning from that mistake and forgiving yourself for that mistake. Di ba? I mean, applicable din yung forgive and forget. Just do it to yourself. But of course, we don't forget the situation. We don't forget. I mean, it's there. But I suppose what we want to forget is the past, the pain, and let it be, and then learn from it to move on. I guess, and that's where the forgiveness comes in. And siguro one thing I'd like to share also, that something that I really learned from a group of people who are much older than me when I was once young. Uh, ang sabi nila is, in all your work, take everything seriously. Take your family seriously, take your work seriously, take everything seriously, but never, never, ever take yourself too seriously. So in other words, have also a sense of humor, diba? Parang learn to laugh at your own mistakes and find humor on your mistake, something like that. No? So yeah, that just wanted to connect and add to that statement of Joy. And does that make sense to you, Miss Joey?
Yeah, yeah. Self-indulgence is the other opposite of the extreme because the tendency there is we deny our own mistakes. So it's also another pitfall. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Mr. Nang and Miss Joey and Miss Joy. Now, I believe Miss Nadine also has a question to ask Miss Joey. So, Miss Nadine, what's the question po?
Thank you for
Ay, wala.
allowing us to understand the mindset, the growth mindset better. However, in the case of self-compassion, this can go a long way. It allows us to forgive ourselves for the mistakes we've done in the past. However, is there such a thing as too much self-compassion? And what would be the red flags that may signal this tendency?
I think the misconception is that too much self-compassion would be self-indulgence. But I think I mentioned this in another talk, but truly self-compassionate people know that they still have to get the work done for themselves and for others. So in that, when you say too much self-compassion, there's no such thing. But what we have to differentiate that from is self-indulgence. Because if you're really self-compassionate, you know that sometimes the things you do will not always be easy. You won't always like the things that you have to do. Such as, say, quitting smoking or accomplishing a difficult task. If you're too self-compassionate or too self-indulgent, then the tendency is to give yourself a reward all the time, or to slack off even, or to say, well, it was too hard anyway. But if you're really self-compassionate, you know that you need to get this done and you will still put your best effort in. And if there's some mistakes, then it's also fine, but you will, as much as possible, prevent those things from happening. So there's that sense of effort and intention. The intention is there. The goal is there. With self-indulgence, it's more complacent.
Okay, thank you, Miss Joey. So for the final question, I think Toby has an additional question to ask you, no? So Sir Toby, good morning. Welcome to the webinar. And what's your question for Miss Joey?
Good morning, Brother Jello. Good morning, Miss Joey, and good morning, JNG. So, final question po, no? When people find themselves in the moment of failure, it may be difficult for them to remember the steps to take or concepts to recall po, no? So, emotions can quickly take over. So, what is the one statement we need to tell ourselves at the moment of failure in order to balance self-compassion or feelings or negativity and regret po?
Oh, what's that one statement you can ask in that moment?
Yes.
I guess in that moment of failure, it would be good to check in with yourself. It might help to check in with yourself and say, what am I feeling right now? And just clock that in. There's this technique called stop. First we stop, and then T is to think of the experience, what went through, and then observe your experience, and then P is to proceed. But if there was one question, I guess you could ask yourself, and you're experiencing that failure, you already know your emotion towards it is, what do I need to do now to take care of myself? And if taking care of yourself means fixing that problem, and then perhaps that's what you should do. But if taking yourself, the answer to that at that moment is, I need a break, then perhaps you can take a break. Because I guess as Mr. Nang said, it tends to be a problem of good people. But when you first ask, what do I need to do now to take care of myself? We're relying on your real need to take care of that emotion. And it's only a momentary taking care of. You still have to move on from that. Does that help? But yeah, when we experience failure, ask yourself, what do I need now? What do I need now to feel better?
Thank you, Miss Joey. And we have who sent us two questions for you, no? The first question is, what do you do if you're on the receiving end of someone's failure? And for example, you're the boss and you are at the receiving end of someone's failure. So how do you manage that?
Oh, this is tougher. Yeah.
It's tough.
Yeah, it's a tough
It's tough.
question because this is where the leadership comes in, right?
Right.
And this is where we have to maintain that relational connection and at the same time motivate others to do better because so many things are at stake. I remember this was asked when it comes to emotional intelligence, one aspect of emotional intelligence is social skills or relating with others. And normally, when you're someone's boss, you have a relationship with that person. And if you have an emotional connection, if you're connected somehow, it's easier to pull them out of it, to, to make them learn from that failure. As opposed to when there's a disconnect, it's like you're the boss and this person is just someone who's working for you. It's harder to motivate them. So if you're on the receiving end, first ask, what's my relationship like with this person? Right? Can I talk to this person in this way and will she take it constructively? How has it been before? There's so many factors that come into play. But I think one approach to it is to first ask yourself, what can I do to help this person more? What can I do to reflect back to this person that he or she made a mistake and he or she has to fix it? But we also ask what from your end as opposed to just ayusin mo yan or tapusin mo yan. Because there's no, how do you call that? There's no nurturing, I guess. And what I guess in psychology and in research, what they also realize is that in leadership or also in corporate situations, there's a relationship we always nurture. And we have to come from that place of wanting others to grow as well. So if we see that failure as something that is definitive, it might not be so constructive.
Right. Yeah. So thank you, Miss Julie. And that same person asked this follow-up question. He said, what about those people who compare themselves and see other people's success, conclude that they are failures or losers?
Then perhaps,
yeah.
What's the question there?
So I guess if you are the person who has the tendency to compare yourself to other people who are very successful, for example, I see someone, ka-age ko siya, pero siya executive na. Ako, hindi pa. So there's a need, there's a tendency for us to compare ourselves, no? And it can be a good thing, but sometimes it can be very debilitating. So
yeah,
and that can be seen as a failure from the person who compares himself. So what advice can you give people like that?
I guess when it comes to the growth mindset, fixed mindset statements, just ask them what's your self-talk? What's your self-talk and how can you change that to make it to adopt a more growth mindset perspective? In one of the slides, right? I'm a failure, then perhaps they can just model for them that this is something you can say, oh, you're just not good at it yet. You failed at this task, but you're not a failure. That's not all of you. We model the behavior that we want to see in others. That might be a bit more helpful.
Right. So I think it's a shift of perspective, right? Instead of always comparing yourself, you see these people as inspiration, as targets. I want to be like that guy, diba? So
yes,
it has to do with perspective, no? And self-compassion is what you said, no?
Yeah, and just telling them as well that okay, you're not this person yet, but you can be, or this person is not someone to be envied, but someone to be admired. There's also that noticing. Yeah, and verbalizing it perhaps might help If you draw it out, then you realize. There's more I can talk about it, but I have to go. I'm very sorry for also for the technical problem.
No problem, Miss
And
Joey, no problem. At least for next
yeah,
time when you join us again, if ever Wi-Fi is bad, I can be the one to share the slides. No problem, ma'am.
yes,
So again, thank you, Miss
yes.
Joey, for being with us. No? We will stay on
Thank you,
because we
Joey.
will further discuss. Sorry, Mr. Long, you
Thank
were saying?
you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Miss Joey. And I must tell you that it's actually a very good discussion, and I actually also appreciate the slides. The slides are actually very nice to look at.
Yeah.
I mean, the slides itself are an artwork. So thank you very much for the slides. You know, the content is great, but the slides are also very, very nice, and it's
Thank
something
you.
that can be indulged with.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Thank you, Miss Joey.
Thank
Have a great day.
you.
We'll see you again soon.
Joey.
Thank you, Joey.
Bye bye.
Bye.
Thank you po.
So good morning, everyone. 10:03 na.
Okay. So hi again. Welcome back, everyone. So for this portion, we're done with the Q&A. Now it's time to have another Q&A, but this time amidst or within ourselves. No? So it's just a deepening and to surface our insights, no, and takeaways. So I think we can start the ball rolling with Miss Chico. So Miss Chico, hi, good morning.
Hi, good morning, Jello. Okay, so actually, I really enjoyed Joey's talk today. I think it was very apt, especially because we know that the period that we're going through right now, with all the challenges, I'm sure that every day there are victories, but also every day, probably sometimes sense also some a bit of failure, because it's really just trying to cope with the daily challenges, which I really appreciated. It's really about recognizing and really just really embracing the victories, and at the same time taking the time to acknowledge the grief. I really like that part. You have to really internalize the grief and see how you can grow from it.
Right.
That's the part that's really most. But I would like to know what parts of the others is the most, I don't know, biting part for you guys.
Well, for me, Chico, I'd like to build on what you said about acknowledging your grief. No, I think sitting with your pain is really very difficult. No, but if we are to move from our failures, I think it's important for us to really acknowledge and sit with our pain and take a moment to pause and breathe and be with it. No, but after being with it, no, we can't sit for a long time. No,
Exactly.
we have to be able to find a way to move. Joey also mentioned, no, I really love the imagery. I don't know if you remember the kintsukurai.
Yes.
She flashed this image of a jar
Beautiful pot.
with a pot that's broken, and then there's a gold painting, no? Because really, after sitting with your pain and acknowledging it, no, the movement comes, I think, through this image, because you do accept that you're broken, but you're also beautiful being broken. No? And that itself is a powerful statement of acceptance, no? Allowing you to move from your pain and also to move forwards, no, towards something. So sometimes, no, it's when we actually suffer a breakdown, when we experience a breakthrough, no? So a breakthrough is when we're able to really find the tenacity or the resilience, or we allow our spirit to soar, no, despite all that we're going through. And so for me, it's more of the day to day of rising up, no, despite the failures, no. That's why we always have this, diba, Chico? We say, let's do it and let's take it one day at a time. And in one day at a time, we have this little breakthroughs, no, allowing us to move forward. Chico and I sit together here, so we often have
This
sharing.
discussion.
So this discussion, so this is very natural to us. So we are each other's ano ba, therapy.
Yes.
Okay, so thank you.
Thanks, Joy.
Thank you, Chico.
Okay, thank you, Miss Chico, and thank you, Miss
And I
Joy.
think somebody said, I think it's very appropriate for us at work. So let's say something doesn't work out for us. We're just like the clay pot, right? You're given a situation. If it doesn't work, how do you make it beautiful, right? How do you take something that's broken or something that you did not expect and turn that into something more beautiful than what was intended? Right? So I really hope that we take the time to really internalize that lesson because that was really, really good point from Joey.
May I comment on what you just said there, Chico and Joy, especially with that jar, that image of that jar. That's that Japanese. Is that a Japanese term?
Yes,
Or,
sir. It's kintsukurai. Kintsukurai.
yeah. Let me share with you, and this is on, and of course, let's reflect all of this under the month, under our theme of tenacity. Tenacity, right? No. That's our theme for the. That's our value for the month. For the month, tenacity. Just the other day, I was just sharing this story with my daughter about ding dong. So, is everybody familiar with ding dong? Right?
The snack.
The snack food, yes, the one that we have in their office, no? And and the reason why we spoke about that because precisely I was talking about tenacity also with her, no? And 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 the story begins. The story begins with no. The story begins with Happy Peanuts. So, are you familiar with Happy Peanuts? So Happy Peanuts was, so Mr. Nang went into the business of quote unquote organic snacks. Instead of chips and stuff like that, he went into organic snacks like, like roasting peanuts and then packing them and then selling them. So which is what the Happy Peanuts is all about. And that was instant success, no? That Happy Peanuts was success because half of the people who liked it really liked the taste, and the other half thought that they were buying happiness, no? So, no, just joking. So everybody liked the Happy Peanuts, and so that encouraged Mr. Nang to develop other products. And so one of the snacks that was equally popular would be Horlicks, right? Right? Many of us have grown up buying Horlicks in sari-sari stores and street vendors. So Mr. Nang and his brother, they bought, sacks and tons of corn. Then after that, simultaneously, so this is the period of expanding, strike when the iron is hot, something like that. No? And so they also went into green peas. So again, you must remember that there are these are street food, and you can buy this always in sari-sari store, mga green peas that was sort of fried and then it's crunchy, right? So the idea of Mr. Nang here is, well, let's get everything that's a little crunchy and popular already, and then let's just repack them, and then let's pack them properly with the quality and distribute them and ensure that it's always available. And then there was also a bean. So I don't know if you remember, there's a product, I think it's available right now, Mr. Bean. Basically, these are beans that were fried and then they're very crunchy, and then they're packed and then sold, and then it's available anytime. So what's the issue there? No, how did Ding Dong came about? Well, unfortunately, the Horlicks, the green peas, and the beans didn't do as well as the peanut. Except that by the time they concluded that it's no longer feasible for these products to continue, they have already bought tons and tons of inventory of this Horlicks, green peas, and beans. And so what they say, what did they do with this? No, it's not going to be sellable, and how's that? No, and so I suppose you all know what happened. Mr. Nang came up with this idea. Why don't we put them all together? All right. Why don't we all mix them together in a pack and then sell them, right? And then sell them cheap, just so that we can gain back the investments we made in all those inventory. And guess what? It was a resounding success, because now that's the reason why we have Ding Dong. No? And turns out the Ding Dong became even a bigger hit than the Happy Peanuts, because Ding Dong is now recognized all over the world. If you go to any Asian store, there will always be a Ding Dong that is being sold. No? So can you imagine that? How failures, combination even of compounding failures, put together actually resulted in a unprecedented success, and even a bigger success than what originally they were aiming for. No, so none of them really thought about the Ding Dong to begin with. But turns out the Ding Dong came out and was even more successful than what they originally planned it to be. So I guess I also want to connect this discussion with the question earlier raised in terms of, how do we deal with failures, regardless of whether we are the receiving end of that failure, or we easily compare ourselves and realize failures. And I guess, I just like to continue that point that really people who think like that are the good people. So in the first place, I think that's one consoling thing that you can, immediately give yourself, is that, well, I only feel bothered this way because I'm a good person. Because a bad person will not feel bothered at any way, parang so what, diba? They'll be indifferent, they'll be ambivalent. But a good person will then therefore will really take ownership of that problem, with that situation. And oftentimes we can, if we are a bit too overtly critical about ourselves, then we stay stuck saying that, what a failure, what a failure, what a failure. And when you have that kind of a thinking, and I'm sharing this from my own experience, it corrupts you. It corrodes you. The word is corrode. It's para siyang ano tawag nun? Para siyang kalawang, no? Na unti-unti nawawala ka, no? It's in a sense it's worse than broken, because broken, like what the picture showed a while ago in the jar, you can sort of put it together. But when you're corroding, bits and pieces of you are just disappearing, disintegrating, and that's very hard, because then how do you become whole again when certain bits are when certain parts of you disappears, right? So that's the problem, I think, when we are overtly critical about ourselves. Again, first things first, let's console ourselves. Maybe we're good naman, no? We're not that bad, diba? And I think that's good, no? that we should recognize that. And I think that has something to do also with a great deal of pride. If we view problems as with pride, with ego, then we can easily stay stuck saying that we're a failure. And unfortunately, sometimes when that happens, our other psychological self-defense mechanism starts coming in. And what started out to be a good person suddenly becomes a bad person, because this is where all sorts of self-defense comes in, and then those defense becomes offense. This is when you start deflecting the issue. Suddenly you're not recognizing them as your own anymore, because it's just too painful, because now it's pride, diba? So you now deflect things. You now blame things. You find blaming others. What do you call that? There's this term gaslight. Diba? You gaslight things. You gloss things over. You suddenly find all sorts of fantastic rational ways to rationalize it, and suddenly think that it's okay, there's no problem, let's. And then this is, of course, where all fake news starts coming in, right? So it's really a downward slope when you become too critical, because then at some point you cannot handle so much criticism against yourself, so much so that you start retaliating and you start getting back at others. And that is where toxicity now comes in. Right? And it just gets worse and worse. And you know how the story goes. I think all of us can start continuing that story, one chapter after another chapter. We've met people like that. We've been probably in situations like that. The contrast is then, therefore, if the problem is having too much pride, then I think the better approach is to be humble. Rather than to be so critical or to be indulgent. Wag naman self-pity, wag naman din yung being harsh. But I think kumbaga sa Tagalog slang, sakto lang, di ba? And that is humility. Let's just be humble about it. Okay, I failed. I failed, right? What can I learn from that failure? How can I now improve from that failure? Yeah. So I think that's very important, is to nurture a sense of humility. And I think that's when one approaches failure as humility, the opposite now happens. Now suddenly the problem gets reframed. It's easier to refrain. We talk about the word refrain. It's a psychological offense naman, di ba? Or something that we can do to do good. And so when we do that, it's easier for us to refrain that failure into a challenge. And when we are able to reframe that failure or that problem, instead of classifying that problem as a failure, you can classify that problem into a challenge. And then if you process that a little bit more, that challenge can then be upgraded to what is called an opportunity, right? And then when you start thinking about challenge, you start thinking about opportunity, then you feel a little more encouraged. Then you feel a little more, how do you say this? You feel a little more empowered, because then you kind of say, because you're now in the realm of positivity rather than in the realm of negativity. So when you take away, when you start going into the realm of positivity, then I suppose this is how you will now start having that growth mindset that Miss Joey was talking about a while ago, rather than the fixed mindset earlier. And I suppose that if you start looking at this is exactly the sort of pattern that Mr. Nang went through with the failure, right, of all these other products. And I'm sure, I mean, you can picture it. You picture that you are facing a bodega full of stocks that are not selling, that you poured all your money into. To be quite honest, that's going to be very difficult. I think it will be very difficult for a lot of people to see that as an opportunity. But that's precisely the lesson we're learning today, that we can do that we can reframe something that is negative into something positive, that allows us, that empowers us to find solutions rather than to wallow in problems and deteriorate and corrode, to nothingness. I mean, today, yes, it's broken, but we can fix it. And in fact, sometimes, or more often than not, you'll end up with solutions far bigger than what you originally thought you wanted. No? So that's something that I'd like to sort of connect what Joy, Chico, and the two other questions mentioned earlier, and obviously the whole talk with Joey. And I'd just like to relate this again to this story with Mr. Na. And as I said, this tenacity, is best exemplified by a lot of stories. I can give you more stories from the real world experiences of Mr. Na. So that's it. I'd just like to share that point with you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Nong, for your insights and your story. It really made us digest the insights of Miss Joey's talk all the more. Now, at this point, we'd like to hear also from Miss Nadine and Carl. Hi, Miss Nadine. Good morning.
Yes, Jello. I'd like to ask Carl. Carl, what is your greatest insight from this presentation? And if I may ask, why is that?
Thank you for that question, Ms. Nadine. So my key takeaway from this would be the importance, or it's important to stay positive or to be optimistic despite experiencing failures. So we should realize that instead of feeling bad, or we are allowed to feel bad after a failure, but we must move on, and we should realize that we can still recover. So in fact, we can even become more beautiful for having been broken or for experiencing failures, as the image of the King Socorroy jar showed. It's broken, but it's still beautiful. So yeah, that would be my key takeaway from this.
Okay, thank you for that, Carl.
Yes.
Hi, Miss Clemmy. Good morning.
Hi, Jello. I want to ask Toby. We learned a lot of insights from Miss Joey's talk this morning. So I want to know, how is her presentation relevant to Toby's work?
Thank you for the question, Kimino. So, I think yung relation ng talk ni Miss Joey with regards to my line of work, which is in recruitment, is yung how to deal with yung failures and disappointment. So, we know naman yung recruitment process, very speedy siya. So, from sourcing to paper screening, interviewing, and then we will do background checks and implementations. No, so very ma-processor siya. Then, like for example, meron tayong gustong candidate, and then hindi na pa sa line manager, or matatapang whole process, and then may siya sa company, pero in the long run parang hindi rin siya tataga. So as a recruiter for me, or as a talent acquisition, parang nakaka-disappoint siya, or for me failure, kasi parang gustong candidate pero hindi siya So ano kaya yung problem? Ano kaya yung possible na mali ko, or hindi ba talaga fit yung candidate? So yun, for me, nakakalot siya, no? So if like for example, gagamitin natin yung sa slide ni Miss Joey na fixed mindset, na parang mag-asosap na lang ako dun sa feeling ko na failure na yun. So, wala mangyayari. So, siguro dun tayo sa parang growth mindset, no? Na parang, okay, lahat naman tayo naka-experience na failure. So, why not parang let's move on. Pero hindi yung parang move on lang na parang, okay, kalimutan na natin siya kasi part siya na work. So, let's grow. So, parang let's improve. And then, make sure na gamitin din natin, or based din dun sa slide ni Ms. Joe, yung rational positivity. Kasi we can be positive lang, or positive thinking na okay lang yun. We can search for another candidate, okay? Pero by being rational, meaning yun nga, let's do a good job, be open for criticisms, kasi nga yun nga, let's hear the side of, like for example, yun sa na-mention ko kanina, na baka hindi pala fit talaga yung candidate, or baka ito yung gusto ng line manager, and then find positive meaning. So parang, okay, baka may mas better na candidate, mas fit yung personality niya dito sa culture ng company, and do good, and lastly, yung be social. So, parang let's ask din yung mga ano natin, colleagues natin. Like, for example, siguro, pwede tayong humingi insights sa, yun nga, sa kasama natin, sa boss natin na possible na improvements din. So, I think yun yung na-learn ko dun sa talk ni Miss Joey na yun nga, specific dito sa line of work ko as a recruiter or sa recruitment. Thank you.
Thank you, Toby.
Thank you for that, Sir Toby. No? At this, I also want to read some of the insights some of our viewers sent in the chat. No, si Sir Ed Calabio said, "We need changing the way we feel and our emotions on something that happened to us would just be temporary if we don't have a change of hearts." No, so again, being compassionate with ourselves and with other people, that requires heart. And for Sir A.B.K. Tan, Denzel Washington, in a speech as a graduation guest speaker, said, "When you fall, make sure you fall forward. If you haven't failed, you have not tried." No? So again, every setback is an opportunity for us to emerge better and stronger than before. Thank you.
A.D. Ketan is our dear lawyer friend, Attorney Nonoy Tan.
Oh,
so
right.
thank you,
Yesterday.
Attorney
Yeah.
Nonoy, for participating and joining in our webinar. That line shared by Attorney Nonoy on Denzel Washington reminded me of another line, also from showbiz, from Batman Begins. So I don't know if you all remember that film.
Yeah.
Wherein the little boy Bruce Wayne fell into the well and was crying, and then the butler Alfred came to him and rescued him, and then he has this line that he asked Bruce Wayne, and he goes, "Master Bruce, why do we fall?"
Yeah.
Right? And then the answer, and apparently it's a lesson that a lesson learned already, and the answer by Bruce Wayne was, "So that we may rise again." So I think that was a very good a line from that movie, which is very similar to what real life Denzel Washington said. So,
very good.
So mamili kayo kung gusto niyong fiction or non-fiction, may magandang linya pwedeng matutunan.
Thank you, sir, for that. Oh, no, as a Batman fan, I did not recall that right away. So thank you, sir, for that.
Oh yeah, you like Batman, di ba?
Yeah, a lot. Yeah, I collect comics.
Fall?
Yeah.
Yeah, why do we fall so we may rise again?
Yeah,
I think that's a very nice.
So we could learn, to pick up. Yeah. See, Miss Claudine also said, though, good times build confidence and difficult times build character. Wow, that's great. Huh? Good things affirm us, but bad times, it makes us stronger. So thank you for that, Miss Claudine. And another from Miss Nadine, no? It's not the number of failures, but the number of times we rise from failures, no? Pati si Rocky Balboa, yan ang sabi niya, di ba? You get hit, you get back up. Yeah. Okay. So, do we have any more comments, insights before we wrap up the Wellness Wednesday webinar?
Well, I just want to touch on what Toby said a while ago, and I think one of the things that Toby identified from the lessons we learned today is the 4 things that we can be positive, or 4 ways to be positive. One of that is to be social, right? And I think in that talk, I remember Miss Joey was talking about how it would be healthy also to share our feelings, and more importantly, the lessons we learned, no? Because it can resonate back, it can radiate back to you that positivity. There are people who ask me, why is it that I do a lot of writing or essays or quotes in Facebook, right? Because I do a lot of that. Although, of course, not everybody reads it because it tends to be the most boring thing. I normally get a lot of likes if I show the picture of my wife, which obviously is a much bigger hit than me. But and the reason why I write that, it's almost like journaling. I don't know if you are familiar with that, but I find that actually very good when I write it down and when I sort of share it, because I remember the lessons better that way. And second is that by putting it out in the open, by sharing it with people, with friends and whoever, it keeps me honest to that lesson that I learned. So that then I don't sort of deny that I didn't learn it. So that the next time something similar problem or situation, negative situation happens, I'm reminded by the lesson that I have, and I will say, oh, wait a minute, I cannot go back against this lesson because I actually learned it already. I cannot pretend that I don't know. I learned it already. And in fact, people know that I know because I posted it. So that's what I mean by helping by being social. It actually helps you to be honest because you sort of put out your word out there already. And of course, sometimes people can learn from you as well. People can learn from your experience, and if they do learn their experience, and then they become social themselves like you, then it encourages you even more, because then you say, siguro tama nga talaga tong naisip ko dahil may ibang nakinabang din, may ibang natuto rin at nakinabang. So then it becomes very reaffirming, and it becomes a very self-sustaining, reassuring process that really gets you step by step out of the negativity, out of the corrosion, out of that brokenness, and you start suddenly at the path of reparation, and we reconstitution, di ba? We had a fantastic talk with Sister Harriet yesterday, and we learned this fantastic word called reintegration. Di ba? Lalim pala ng word na yan. But anyway, ito yung path. Di ba? Ito yung path. You repair yourself, you restore yourself, and then you bring back your wholeness, you become full again, and then you can reintegrate yourself again to anything. Di ba? I think that's a very good note that Toby made, and I just like to share a little bit that how I also agree very much with that statement of being social. It's not good to keep it to ourselves. By the way, Jesus Christ had 12 people he shares the stories with. So it's good. Even on his dying moment, kinakausap nga niya he's still being social, di ba? Even in his dying moment, he was still talking to the guys on the left and the right. Right? And it helps. And it definitely helped the other guy, di ba? The other guy was actually fortunate enough to join him in paradise. The other guy, unfortunately, was just mumbling. Di ba? So, it's just nega lang siya, kaya yun, dun lang siya. All right. Thank you very much, Angelo. You could, I think there are some other comments that you'd like to share to the group.
Sige, sir. Sir Irwin said, tenacity is the mother of progress. That's very true. Miss Annalyn Derpo said, always look for the silver lining in every failure. And here's Miss Nina Alejandro. I think that's her, right? MJ Alejandro is Miss Nina. Failure is a bruise, not a tattoo. We should not get pushed against the wall when we fail. Failure should inspire us to get up and take the challenge to become a determined person. For when we fail, we learn. Failure allows us to grow and get better understanding and have better perspective. Ayun. So thank you.
Wow, beautiful.
Thank you, everyone, Miss Nina, Miss Annalyn, and Sir Erwin for those insights, no?
By the way, Jello,
Yes, sir.
I think the comment of Anna is a very Ignatian. It's a very
Yeah.
Ignatian statement,
Consolation,
diba?
yeah.
And
Yeah.
one of the principles of our, which by the way is our spirituality as well. And Jello will actually be introducing us to the Ignatian spirituality more and more as the weeks pass. And I think one of those Ignatian spirituality is finding God in everything.
Yeah.
Diba? Find you know, to a slightly more general statement, finding good in everything, but in a more spiritual sense, that is finding God in everything, even in the face of disaster.
Correct.
Diba? Even in the face of disaster. So, I sorry, but I'd like to share you another story. And this is a story by John Ong. So just to let you know, John Ong was one of our speakers before. He's a very good friend of ours. And he is also connected with our Joy Nostalg Foundation. He has helped me also think about, conceptualize about the foundation. Unfortunately, he's not as active as he wanted. He would have wanted. No? But I remember, if you recall, guys, there was I forgot lang which town, which province this happened, but it was very, very big news. This was a tragedy wherein there was long periods of rain, and what happened was that this whole mountain or hillside eroded, and at the foot of that hill or at the foot of that mountain was a small barangay of 100 plus people. And if you remember this news, I forgot really which year this happened. But I know it's after Ondoy. No? What happened was that people then were mobilized to look for the survivors. Diba? And so obviously there's a term, diba? Parang search and rescue operations. But then I think hours and day and then I think a day passed or something that they could not find survivors. But then they also became very concerned because not only could they not find survivors, they could not even find victims. So they were just in a quandary in terms of what is going on. Where did all the people have gone? All right? Structures, including structures. And by this time, there was actually an international effort that came to rescue because obviously, unfortunately, we don't have so much of this rescue tools, techniques, technology. And so all sorts of aid came from different countries. Taiwan, and I remember Taiwan, I think Japan also, etc. Okay. And John Ong is a magnet for disasters, no? Just to let you know. He's a very unique friend of mine, wherein he is like a fireman, no? But worse, quote unquote, worse than a fireman because a fireman always enters the building on fire where everybody's supposed to get out, right? And John Ong does the same thing, just about in all sorts of disaster. When there's a volcano that erupted, you can bet he's on the way to that volcano. Where there is an earthquake that erupted, he's on his way to the epicenter. All of these things that happen, any natural disaster, you find him going towards that while everybody's running away from him. So this is that one time wherein he went to that place because he wanted to study the mudslide, he wanted to study the erosion, he wanted to know what exactly happened, how it will be prevented, etc., etc. But at the moment, first things first, let's look for the survivors, which eventually became a search for the victims. And he said that he can smell the stench of death. And I don't know what that is, but he said it really is terrible. No matter how he covered his nose and everything, he can smell it through his skin. Sabi niya, have you ever smelled something through your skin? Through the skin of your hands and ganyan. Sabi ko, I cannot understand what that is. But that's his description. He can smell the stench through the skin of his hands. Can you imagine that? But despite having that, they could not find. It took them, I think, almost a week before they found the victims. Turns out, the victims were washed away, moved away kilometers away from the original site, which is why they could not find it. They thought that natabunan. Diba? They thought natabunan sila. Natabunan. Ang hindi nila nalaman na not only natabunan ang barangay, kung hindi, that whole momentum, that whole landmass pushed all that barangay kilometers away. Okay, which is why it was very hard to find. Okay, so that's the story. And then you know what John Ong told me? And he said, but Jack, there was a moment wherein it was actually a very nice moment. And then I was telling him, I really cannot understand you anymore, right? Well, what do you mean that it's a beautiful moment? You were just talking to me about all of this disaster. You were just telling me how to experience smell through my skin. And then now you're telling me that there was a very beautiful moment. All right? Yes, you're right. Later. Tama. Who said that? That's right. Later. And then he goes, because Jack, at that moment, people of different walks of life, rich and poor, Filipino, non-Filipino, different nationality, it did not matter. Everybody was just there as equals, looking for fellow human beings. Japanese, Taiwanese, they were talking to Filipinos as if they understood each other, which obviously they could not. But nevertheless, they were communicating. They were trying their best to communicate with each other, and they were understanding each other. And they all were understanding each other because they shared a common goal. They shared a common moment of a certain sense of mission. At that point, sabi niya, everybody was one. Walang bossing, walang police. Of course, nakikita mo police, naka-police outfit, nakikita mo yung officials like this and like that. Kaya lang, wala. No, everybody was just there as one. And so he goes, sabi niya, at that moment, that was a fantastic picture. That was a fantastic moment. It just, sabi niya, at that moment, I really felt we were all brothers, even if we didn't know each other. And that we were all brothers in Christ. See, fantastic. Sabi ko, okay. Sabi ko sa kanya, okay, great. That's that's really a manifestation of finding good. In this particular case, in fact, finding God in everything, no matter how bad, which is similar to what Anna was saying. There's always a silver lining. So anyway, so I just sorry for that. Every time something good like that, I get to recall these stories. And I think it's good to share these stories because these are the stories that make us appreciate tenacity, appreciate our values even more, because these are now values in action, values experience. These are not just values theoretically being discussed.
All right.
So that's all.
Thank you, Mr. Nong, for that. Thank you so much. Do you have any more insights and comments before we close the Wellness Wednesday webinar? Okay. So again, thank you everyone for participating. Thank you JNG community for logging in today. I hope you were able to take away many things from this discussion, no? From learning from failures to being self-compassionate and hopefully radiating that compassion with those around you. So once again, thank you, Joy Nostalg. Thank you, my fellow panelists, and we'll see you again this Friday in our first ever Forward Fridays webinar. So I'll see you all on Friday, 9 a.m. for our next webinar. Have a nice day, guys, and enjoy your day.